Hello, and welcome to Symphony's PeopleSoft Visioning Series. Our visioning sessions are geared to the more advanced modules and functionality of PeopleSoft. Today's session is focused on position management, which many organizations have as a requirement, but never seem to get it in operation. Your hosts today are Gary Smith, who is Director of ERP Operations at Symphony, and I am Harry Matlitsky, an ERP Account Executive. Between Gary and me, we have almost 40 years' experience with PeopleSoft and have both worked for PeopleSoft in our careers. We are hoping that our visioning session will get you thinking beyond basic human resources and begin to think about the big picture of human capital management. When you start thinking big picture and take advantage of more application features, the return on your organization's investment is magnified. Please note the two links on this slide. For viewing the videos and presentation on Symphony's Visioning Series, go to tinyurl.com/PeopleSoft Vision. To view the graphic, which shows in detail the integration of the modules of PeopleSoft Human Capital Management, go to tinyurl.com/PeopleSoft Graphic. When contemplating the use of position management, there are three areas that need to be considered. They are configuration, end use, and maintenance. Configuration. We need to assess what it would take to configure the module and if there is data that will need to be converted. End use. What are the requirements of the users? This includes all levels of management. Maintenance. Once the module is configured and is live, what will be the level of effort to support and maintain the application? I'll now turn the presentation over to Gary, who will discuss these points in detail in regards to position management.
Hello. Some of the key things that you need to consider if you are contemplating implementing position management is your organization. Does it change frequently? What we mean by that is, do you have a lot of reorganizations, or you have a high turnover? Is your organization static? These are key decisions that you need to take into account before you decide to turn that module on. Another option you have is that you could turn the module on for a portion of your organization, and that could be a company, a division, or it actually could be a couple of levels of management, say, from the top down. And another thing is, are you planning now or in the future to implement succession planning? If that is a true statement, position management fits very, very well with the implementation of succession planning. They work well together. And if you are considering installing it, some other important things to keep in mind is the impact that you're going to have to your administration of the system and to your administrators. They are used to administrating people, and now they're going to not only be administrating the people, but they are going to be administrating the positions, which is a key change. Also, there are changes that will be impacted to manager self-service, because a lot of the changes that happen now are based upon employee. And if you are changing an employee now, the decision needs to be determined whether that change also happens to the position. So in a lot of cases, the delivered self-service transactions will not update the database directly without having an administrator review them. And then there also will be changes to your workflow, because now you want your workflow to flow to the position for approval that reports to, as opposed to the supervisor. The next step would be to start the configuration once you've made the decision to move forward with position management. The key ingredient to that is, of course, planning the actual date in which you're going to implement. Like all PeopleSoft configuration tables, position management uses an effective date. The date that you select should be coordinated with your payroll team to make sure that you are going to start on a pay period begin date, so that it'll have the least amount of impact to your payroll process. The other thing to decide on, again, is, are you going to turn on full position management or just partial? Again, if it's full position management, that means every person in the organization will need a position, number tied to them. Partial means only some people will have to have that. And then some of the pitfalls you need to really try to avoid is the impact to your administrative staff, again, because they're going to be administrating not only the people but the positions, the impact to self-service, and that the administrators now will be involved in making decisions on manager self-service, whether the transaction needs to be applied to the position or just the person. And then, of course, the changes to the workflow where it's going to be flowing to the reporting position as opposed to the supervisor. The next critical item that you would want to be sure of is who is the end users of this. With position management, there usually is a minimum one, which is HCM administrators, but a lot of time finance will also be involved because you can bring in budgeting to this as well. And the budgeting can be by positions, or it can be by departments within those positions. One of the critical things we find in most organizations is that the headcount between HR and finance are always two different numbers due to FTE and the way that each one counts. Do you count people on leave or not? And generally when you implement position management, that resolves a lot of those conflicts between the two different areas of the organization. The other thing about position management, if you would like to, you can turn on budgeting and do that budgeting process. And if you have PeopleSoft financials and using commitment accounting, you can actually integrate the budgeting and the actual tracking directly into finance. And then again, how is that going to impact those particular end users in the administration, especially on the HCM side, which we know will be very impacted, but also potentially finance if they are going to be getting involved, at least from a budgeting perspective. The last thing to understand is the maintenance, and the maintenance is really understanding how you're going to administrate those positions as opposed to just people, and also understanding the impact when you do have an organization change in the future. How I'm going to do a mass change, say, to a bunch of positions and people as opposed to just the people. So understanding that impact before you turn it on is very, very important, and also because you want to make sure that you don't implement this system and then when you have a new organization change, you have a lot of problems. You want to make sure you plan and account for that. So that will conclude our PeopleSoft Visioning Series on position management. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact either Harry or myself at the Symphony Corporation. And thank you very much for taking the time.